Perhaps you've heard of the town of Dresden in your newspaper or on the radio. It's been in the news for some time now because of an issue of racial discrimination. It's claimed that a color bar exists there. In support of this claim, colored people state they are refused service in several business establishments in the town. Now, this refusal is an offense under the Anti-Discrimination Act recently passed by the Ontario government, and charges have already been laid in the Dresden situation. Now, what are the facts in the Dresden story? Are white and colored citizens there really locked in a fierce racial conflict? Is this quiet little town bitterly anti-Negro? On your behalf, we try to find the answers to these questions on the spot in the community of Dresden. Dresden is a small place, 2,000 people, about 12% colored. It's a typical Ontario town, with a post office dominating a main business street. Business is the principal activity, and the principal customers are the farmers in the district. They come to town to market their produce, to meet and talk. There are a number of colored farmers in the district, too. Dresden is a typical service center, with a good assortment of stores of all kinds, with plenty of garages, repair shops, and so on. It has two industries, a canning factory and a wood products mill. The mill operates the year round and offers employment to all. No discrimination evident here. White and colored work side by side and very amiably. There are many contradictions in Dresden. There are no housing restrictions. Colored and white live side by side as friendly neighbors. No segregation, no colored district. People live where they choose, as they can afford. The children all go to the same schools, play together, mingle freely. Among school children of all ages, there's no sign of any discrimination. They share a fine modern high school, share the school buses, study together. They meet at school and out of school, wear the same sort of clothes, share the same interests. White and colored do not meet in the churches. There are no colored members of the white Protestant churches, no colored Catholic families in the district today. The colored people belong to the Baptist church, but they have their own church, whether from choice or necessity. The church has been a great factor in their lives for more than 100 years. Near the town is the old home of one of their early pastors, the Reverend Josiah Henson, known to all the world as Uncle Tom. An American slave who escaped to Canada, Josiah Henson came to the Dresden district in 1830. He devoted the rest of his days to helping other escaped slaves make a new life in their new country. Harriet Beecher Stowe learned of his experiences as a slave and wrote her famous book, Uncle Tom's Cabin. Henson worked all his life for freedom and equality for his people. Today, 70 years after his death, it's claimed that these rights have still not been achieved. The colored people of Dresden claim that not all of their town is open to them. Among others, we talked to Ruth Lampkin, a young high school student. She told us that there were places in town where she could not go with her white school friends. We asked her how she felt about this.
Well, myself, I don't want to go myself because I only go where I'm wanted. Where I'm not wanted, I don't go.
This was the attitude of many of the colored people in Dresden. And they add that there are just 9 business establishments in town that refuse service to colored people. 9 public places out of the dozens that serve everyone in town. A few places closed to the colored citizen, the majority open. Why? What do the people of Dresden think of this situation? What is their attitude towards discriminating shops, towards their colored neighbors? And what do they feel should be done? We ask these questions. Dr. French, do you feel or don't you feel that anyone operating a public service should accommodate all the public, accommodate all comers?
I'll answer it this way. Personally, I have made no difference, and I think it's up to the individual to work out his own business.
Well, what do you think might be the solution to this problem?
Simply leave matters the way they were 2 or 3 years ago, and there has been no prejudice until just lately, and I think it'll work out itself.
Has the Catholic Church in Dresden taken a stand on this current controversy?
Yes, the Catholic Church has always taken a stand, not only in Dresden, but all over the world, because the word Catholic means universal.
Well, what do you think is the best solution to this problem, Father?
I believe it can be solved by treating all people exactly the same, by treating the colored people of Dresden just the same as the other people, treating them in a kindly and friendly manner. This local problem will be happily solved by the local citizens, who have learned by experience that it is unwise to take advice from those who never offer anything else.
So, the act that has been passed, what's your opinion on that act? Rotten act.
Yes, because you can't force anybody to serve anybody at any time.
Many people seem to think so.
If they continue it, well, there'll be civil war in Canada in spite of themselves.
Do you think this will be
This is the showdown.
This is a pretty general feeling in the town, do you think?
That's the general feeling in the town. We have nothing against, and haven't got anything against the colored people.
Yeah.
They've made a mess in their own nest.
Yeah.
Do you think they have a lot of support or not?
Been backed by the people from outside.
Yeah. Who are these people? Do you think?
Well, there's the colored people from some of the big organizations in the States. There's the communists that are looking for trouble all the time, and there's the Jews that are behind it.
Yes, he's working in Chattanooga.
We also called on Mrs. Hugh Burnett, wife of the leading spokesman for the colored people of Dresden, and asked her what she thought about the discrimination issue.
Views completely on this whole situation?
Well, yes, I think it's a terrible thing and should be cleaned up. It should have been years ago. And I think it's very bad for the children to come up with a feeling that they do.
It may be a long, difficult job, Mrs. Burnett.
Well, we're considered as second-class citizens now, and I think maybe we deserve to be if we won't fight for our rights.
How do you explain the resentment of the townspeople?
Well, I think that they feel that they're superior to us, and unless we stand up for our rights and have everything that citizens should have, I think that they will continue to feel that way.
Only a few people in Dresden would be interviewed. Most wished to keep silent on the issue, if possible. But it crept into every conversation. One or another of the opinions you've heard here could be heard there, anywhere in the town. To provide a forum for these opinions, to probe deeper into the controversy that grips this community, we offered our on-the-spot cameras to its citizens. 12 of them agreed to speak for Dresden, for both white and colored Dresden. They met in 2 groups, one white and one colored. All felt that this arrangement would stimulate frank and open discussion. Both groups discussed the same questions. And though they met separately, we present their views on each question alternately. All were citizens of the town and district. On one panel, Mr. Hodson, editor of one of the 2 weekly newspapers in Dresden, Mrs. French, prominent in women's affairs, Mr. Schultz, principal of the Dresden Public School, And sitting on my left, Mr. Cluderet, manager of a wood products mill, and Mr. Yonts, proprietor of one of Dresden's barber shops, and the Reverend Mr. Gower, pastor of the North Dresden Baptist Church. And on the other panel, Mr. Hansor, a young man in the printing trade, and Mrs. Carter, a housewife who is active in community affairs, Mr. Burnett, a carpenter and secretary of the National Unity Association, and on my left, the Reverend Talbot, pastor of the Queen Street Baptist Church, and Miss Carter, a teacher in a county school, and Mr. Hanson, who has farmed in the Dresden district for many years. Well, now, would you say that racial prejudice in Dresden is a recent thing, or an old thing, or what?
Well, I think it's fairly recent. I don't think we were conscious of it until just lately.
Mm-hmm. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the first thing that we'd like to discuss with you is whether or not you feel that racial discrimination is a recent thing in Dresden. What would you say to that?
I wouldn't say it's too recent. It's been going on for over 100 years, or around 100 years. And it's been as bad as long as I can remember as it is now.
Yes, sir.
I'm sure that there is always in the mind of the colored people the question of discrimination. He's always in the background of his mind the thought that he may be discriminated against.
Any other comment on this point?
Well, I agree with Mr. Burnett. As long as I can remember, that's all I've heard. I can't go into this restaurant and I can't go into that restaurant. Ever since I've been so high.
Well, now, Mrs. French and gentlemen, I want to ask you this. Is there racial discrimination in employment in Dresden? I mean, are all jobs equally open to all?
I think so, yes.
Yes, I think so myself.
Would you say that this applies, the equality of job opportunity applies in all fields?
For instance, our town foreman is a colored man.
I see.
Yes.
It is true, of course, that you do not see them in the retail stores. At the same time, I wouldn't suggest that they are barred from those jobs. There is always a possibility that they are not fitted
Yes.
for that particular job.
You mean by reason of education or training? Or
Possibly.
Yeah. Are all jobs equally open to all or not?
Well, we have men have had jobs in some of these factories for 30 years or over, and they have never been promoted to a better job, such as foreman or supervisor, in any of the plants, as far as I know.
Regardless of their true merit.
Yes.
What other instances would you cite in regard to discrimination in employment?
Well, as far as I know, we have no girls employed in any of the stores or in any office in the town of Dresden.
Oh, yes, we have recently a girl employed in the Dresden Times.
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't know.
Well, now, to get on to another point, the National Unity Association is described as an association of colored people in this district, which has protested discriminatory practices and has sought prosecutions under the new act. Do you think that this association is supported by the majority of colored people in the district?
My impression is that there is a minority, and quite a small minority. They do not represent the colored people of this district.
I'm afraid I have to disagree with Mr. Gower. My information is that apart from 4 families who, while they agree with the principles of the National Unity Association, do not agree with the methods which they employ to bring those principles into effect. And of those, in those 4 families, there are children who do.
Would you say that the association is supported by the majority of colored people in the district?
Yes, I would.
Are you all members here or not?
I am not. No, I'm not a member.
You, Mr. You're not a member.
That leaves Mr. Hanson and Mr. Burnett.
I hope we're all supporters, though.
Well, is that the case?
I could say that the majority of colored people are supporters. Those that come to the church are heartily in favor of the action of the National Unity Association, have backed them whenever requested.
Would you venture a percentage of the colored people in the district who do support the association?
Yes, I would easily say 95, 96%.
General agreement on that figure, or not? Yes. Now, is the association a purely local body?
Yes, it is. It's governed completely by local people. We have no outside affiliation. That is, we have no outside governing body at all.
It's been suggested that this issue is really the product of outsiders.
Well, you can readily understand that the colored people living in Dresden would not spearhead that proposition. They've still got to live here. Isn't it true that a lot of these outside organizations who want to make trouble in these days would pick on this incident and give support to it, and who are possibly not just interested in the betterment of the condition of these people or the town, but just in making trouble?
I might just say that I suggested to the officer of the Labor Board that instead of investigating those who were reported on to the extent that they have, if they investigate those who had made the complaint, in many cases they would have found the culprit.
Well, now, you mention outsiders and outside organizations whom you feel are interfering in this local situation. Now, just who would these people and these associations be?
I think that there is a feeling among the people of the town, and undoubtedly it is true that communistic influences seize on opportunities like this and offer their support, which are usually accepted by the people involved because they're glad to have any support. But this support is detrimental, and I believe that possibly we wouldn't have the trouble involving so many people if it had not been forthcoming.
You feel then that there is some communist influence in the incidents that have taken place here?
It seems to follow their pattern, to me.
But do you have any definite knowledge of this?
No, I haven't.
Well, now, the suggestion has also been made that there's some communistic influence in your association and in this issue. Now, what have you to say on this point?
No, there's not any communist associated with our organization.
Well, Mr. Burnett, at the risk of embarrassing you, I'd like to ask you a very direct, blunt question. It's been suggested that you yourself have some communist affiliation or attachment, and that this accounts for your activity in this in the association and your interest in this current issue. Would you care to make a statement on this point?
That's almost too fantastic to talk about. Of course, I am not a member of a Communist Party. I have no affiliation whatever with the Communist Party, and I never intend to. It's my job as Secretary of National Unity to keep my eyes open for any overtures by the Communist Party or front organizations. And
have there been such overtures?
There has. We have filed a few of them.
Yes.
We do not intend in any way to be involved with communists in any way at all. I think it's very silly to even accuse me of being a communist because I stick up for my rights.
I think it's very unfair for anyone to label us as communist. To my knowledge, none of the colored people in this town are communist or affiliated with communists.
Or even in the whole area, couldn't you say?
Right, yes.
I think the association is fighting for a principle, the principle of freedom for all citizens. They don't want to see anyone classed as second-class citizens. They want everyone treated the same.
Also, from a national or international standpoint, the more discrimination we have in the country, the more there is for the communists to work on.
Well, now, perhaps we could talk a little bit about what the root causes of racial prejudice and discrimination may be. What do you think they are as you've seen them here in Dresden or elsewhere or anywhere? The gentleman here seemed to have been dominating the conversation, Mrs. French. Do we have an expression of opinion from you on this point?
Well, I think possibly that the fear of intermarriage has a great deal to do with it.
Since we're living in a democratic country, if two people, colored and white, if they decide that they want to be married, we've simply got to let them make their choice and go on with it. That's their freedom and that's their liberty. Not that we would encourage it. In fact, I feel we would discourage it as far as possible, but it's up to them to make their own decision.
Trying to find the root cause, it seems to me that it's so simple. If only we could sit down the way this panel is sitting down here tonight, discuss the matter in a reasonable way on the basis of Christian fellowship and brotherhood. That's all this question is.
You feel this would be one of the soundest solutions of this problem?
I think it is the only actual solution.
What do you think is, on this point of discrimination, what do you think is its root cause? Where do you think it springs from?
I think perhaps the slaves, as they were escaping from slavery, must have brought a feeling of servitude with them, yes. Then I think it must give white people a certain satisfaction, which is probably quite natural, to feel that someone is slightly beneath them.
The root cause, another root cause, is ignorance. People act this way because they don't know any better, and education will bring them out of this. And the law will force the people to educate them because the law will have a penalty attached to it. If they break the law, then they'll have to suffer a penalty, so they'll be prepared by being educated, not to discriminate.
Maybe they'll develop a whole new set of habits.
Yes, that's where it seems to be. And I think it is just something that has been living through the years.
Much of the controversy in this situation centers around the Ontario Fair Accommodation Practices Act, passed last June, I think. The Act makes it a statutory offense to discriminate in public places on grounds of race, creed, color, nationality, ancestry, or place of origin. Now, what is your opinion on this Act?
I don't think that you can enforce or force anyone to do something that's against their own principles, whether they're right or wrong.
That is quite true if the people of Dresden will take hold of it and endeavor to solve it. But to let it go and do nothing about it, thinking it's going to solve itself, we'll get nowhere.
Mr. Yance, you perhaps are a little more personally concerned with the enforcement of this law. We haven't heard an opinion from you on the Act as yet. Would you care to?
Well, I feel the Act places me between two forces. The force of the people who tell you flatly that they will not patronise you if you serve colored people, and the law. Yes.
How many people have told you, Mr. Yance, that they would refuse to patronize you?
Well, no, I couldn't tell you a definite number, Mr. Cleary.
Well, approximately.
But I can assure you a high enough percentage that would certainly make you stop and consider.
And you really think they mean it?
I certainly do.
Then I'm disappointed in the people of Dresden.
I cannot conceive of Christian people taking such an attitude.
Perhaps those people aren't the ones that go to church. Maybe they haven't been educated that way.
I can assure you they are people who go to church, many of them. And it isn't that they're not Christian either, I can assure you. They're fine Christian people.
I'd like to hear what you think of this act.
I feel the act is an excellent step in overcoming discrimination. That way, if it's prosecuted the way it should be, the people who have their prejudices, personal prejudices that is, will not be allowed to run their business. I think all personal prejudices should be kept at home.
And legislation is a first step to education.
Mm-hmm. And there's a general agreement that you feel it can successfully be enforced?
I feel that way too, because for these 100 years, they're supposed to be educated during that time, and they still haven't done anything about it. People were created equal, and I think everyone wants his personal freedom, regardless of race, creed, or color.
Yeah.
Well, we're born Canadians, and we expect to be treated as such.
And it has been stated that you can't make a law to make one man love another. I think Premier Frost knew very well that that law would not do that, but it would eliminate the act of discrimination. And of course, our personal feelings will come into it later. We will learn to like each other.
What we're sure of is that people should love one another, that Christianity should have a prominent place in the lives of everyone who profess to follow their master. And people should be expected to love one another, because that's the only way that peace can prevail upon earth.
Just in finalizing my thoughts on this whole matter, I would like to look at it from the angle of, let me say, an ex-serviceman who has seen action. Today we hear an awful lot about the H-bomb and the atom bomb. God forbid that time will ever come to this country. But it may, it can, it is possible. If it does, then you and I and every other member of the town of Dresden or of this country will get together in any mud hole, regardless of his race or his color or any other type of prejudice. We'll be glad to snuggle up to our fellow man. We'll regard him as a man. Gone in a flash will be all this prejudice and discrimination, merely because he's a man. Fellowship, a community of feeling, something we can cling to, the principles that we've been trying to explain here tonight.
Well, as you've seen and heard, there is goodwill in Dresden as well as bitterness. And there's little or no hatred and certainly no violence. Still, there are sharp differences of opinion. Before this issue is settled, there may be more incidents, more stories in the press and on the radio. Dresden dislikes its notoriety. People there feel they've been condemned unfairly. And this caused them to ask us questions. Why single out Dresden for criticism, they asked. What community is completely free from restriction and discrimination? Are the colored people in the Maritimes any better off than our people? What about the position of the Asiatics on the West Coast? What about discrimination against the New Canadian, the Indian, the Jew? These questions we heard very frequently. Also, many people there feel that calling any public attention to their controversy does more harm than good. Incidentally, they included our on-the-spot activity in this judgment. Well, their answers to our questions, their questions to us, their comment and criticism, we've passed on to you as we received them. And that's the Dresden story, thus far. The end is still to come. The Dresden Story was produced by Julian Biggs, Gordon Burwash, and Grant McLean. Location sound, Joseph Champagne. On the Spot, a National Film Board of Canada production.